Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card is a holiday card. I'm using my Fine Tech Pearl watercolors. I have a sample here that you can see all the colors on the black cardstock. They're really shimmery and they're very opaque. I used them on a video last week with butterflies. It's so beautiful, so I thought it would be a great Christmas card. I'm going to use this tree from Twinkle Trees by Stampin' Up! And I just got this new sentiment set from Lawn Fawn. It's got a bunch of really nice holiday sentiments in it. So I'm going to start off by taking my Stampin' Up! Black cardstock and I'm going to stamp my tree in the lower left hand corner with some Versamark ink. And I'm going to sprinkle the clear embossing powder on this as soon as I do it so I can see exactly where I've stamped my tree. And now I can stamp my other tree just a little bit to the right and up, so I don't want them exactly even. So I want one a little tiny bit higher than the other. And then I'll go ahead and sprinkle the embossing powder on this one. And I'm going to heat it at this point because the next trees are going to be behind, so I need the powder melted for the next set. You can use whatever masking tools you have on hand. I'm just grabbing some Post-its because the lines on these trees are pretty straight, so I just put one on each. And then I just quickly marked the top of each of the trees since I covered them and I couldn't see. Because I want the one that I'm stamping to be just a little bit higher than both of those trees. So I'll position that in between and stamp it down. And then I'll remove my Post-its and put some clear embossing powder on. Now the problem with using the Post-its is that it does leave a little bit of adhesive residue. So your embossing powder may stick to it a little bit, but it's easily remedied. Just take a paintbrush and just brush off the excess wherever it was sticking. And then you're good to go. So I'm going to heat that, and then I'm going to cover up those trees and stamp one in the back, and I'll put the embossing powder and heat it, and then I have one more in the very, very back. So I'm just kind of masking all these trees as I go. So I'm going to cover that again with clear embossing powder and heat it to set it. So now I've got all my trees stamped and I'm ready to start watercoloring. As I mentioned in previous videos, I'm going to be using these Ranger brushes. So I'll be consistent each time. I'm using the number 4 brush. I'm just keeping them in this package. There's a nice hole in the back that I can pull them out, and I just kind of keep them stored upright. Now this has a light green and a dark green in the set. So I'm going to start with the light green, and I'm just going to get some water on my brush and really work it into the paint. So the more you work it into the paint, the water, the kind of thicker and more opaque it's going to be. So what I'm going to do, since I don't have an outline around these trees, is I'm going to create one with my paintbrush first. So I'm going to paint all the way around the tree, and then I'll just fill it in the middle. And you'll notice that as I fill it in, I don't get any water stains where I had drawn the outline. So when I hit the outline as I'm filling it in, it just blends right in and you can't see that I first created that outline. So I'm making my edges a little bit rounded on the top and on the bottom, like on the sides. And then I'm going to work on my next one. These two aren't really touching each other, but I'm just going to color it the same way, and you can see how the embossing powder is resisted and you get these really pretty black lines, swirlies in the middle. This is the second video I've done with these paints. I'm really super impressed with how opaque they are and how easily they blend on this black cardstock. And this cardstock is not watercolor paper, so it does warp just a tiny little bit, but it's really not that bad because the paints don't require a lot of water. Now for the next 2 trees, which are behind these trees, I'm using the dark green, and I'm going to do them the same way. Now I'm slowing it down here. When I get to the line between the trees, I am going to leave a tiny little black area that's uncolored, and that's going to serve as kind of my separator between the 2 trees. So that way I kind of get a line in between the 2 trees. And so I'm going to color that one that's right behind the first 2, and then I'm going to color this one off to the side in the same way with this dark green color. And again, leaving that tiny little line in between the trees to separate them. Now for my final tree, there's kind of a pewter color here, and I thought kind of a grayish color would be good for the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that again the same exact way. This is more of a silvery, but more pewter, I would say. So it's not quite as bright of a silver. It's more of a grayish silver. I know you can't see my water off to the side, but I do have a jar of water that I keep dipping my brush into to keep the paint fresh. All right, so here the trees are finished. You can see how shimmery they are and shiny and opaque on this black cardstock. I wanted a star on the tree, so I picked a star from this Lucky Star set by Lawn Fawn, and I'm just going to stamp it with some Versamark ink, and I'll clear emboss it just like I did with the trees. and then I'll heat it to set it. And there's a gold, a really beautiful gold in this set. It's the second paint from the left on the top row. And so I'm using that same number 4 brush to fill in that gold star. Now there is also kind of a bronzy brown, and it's the color that's on the second row, the second from the right. And I'm just going to use my paintbrush to draw in some tree trunks at the bottom. The first 2 obviously you can see, and then there's one in the back that you can see, so I'm going to add a little bit there. I just felt like I needed this little detail. So that completes all of my watercoloring. I am going to trim back this panel on the right and the top, and so I can add some color behind it. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I'm using some Ranger Gold embossing powder. It's my favorite gold embossing powder. It's very bright. It's not kind of a tarnished gold. It's really pretty. I'll have a link to it. And then I'm going to put some ATG tape runner on the back of this and mat it to a piece of wild wasabi cardstock. And this has about 1/4 inch at the top, 1/4 inch at the bottom, so that you can see just a little bit of green. I thought it matched my watercolors pretty well. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to put some adhesive on the back. I'm going to mat it to a Nina Solar White card base. And I've got about a little less than 1/4 inch on each side that's showing. And that is the card for today. So lots of really shimmery watercolor. I like the way it came out. It looks really pretty in real life. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.